Today you'll see two woven makes, really pretty. One is a dress, one is a top, really easy to sew. So I'm gathering there and a really unique way to enclose some seams. You don't want to miss out. Stay tuned. Just a flash of the print. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing. It is pouring back there, but it's not so bad, it's not windy, and it's also a mood booster for me to be out here. So green out there. Let's get back into the video. Today I have some woven makes. I've been really excited to sew these up in the last couple of days. This is a new pattern from Emporium. Kate, the designer, she puts up a video on YouTube showing like 20 of her versions. It's always super inspiring, and I thought, hey, that's a really nice comfortable style that I would like to try out. I was able to sew the pattern up real quick, and I've made two versions. One is a dress, one is a top. The pattern is called Meet You There, top and dress. And the common feature that you see in the line out here are the tiers. So depending on the type of tiers, the length of them, and how many you put in there, you can go from a really short top to all the way down to a really long maxi skirt. The bodice is a really simple bodice, easy to fit. It doesn't have any darts. What I like about the bodice is that it's just not straight across. On the front, it does account for volume of bust, so there is a slight curve in the center front. When I saw the shape of the pattern piece, I was immediately excited, and yeah, I really liked what I saw when I was printing out and seeing the shapes of the pattern. For the neckline, it's round, and you can choose between three depths, one that is higher, a medium, and a lower. I chose the medium one for my makes. There is a back yoke. The way you finish the neckline is with binding. You can make it sleeveless, and you can finish the armhole with binding as well. Otherwise, there are two sleeve options, and they are sort of the fuller type of sleeve, bishop sleeve. One is a half length. It will sort of reach the elbow and is gathered in with a casing and elastic, and the other one is 3/4 length. You can put in ties at the waist as an option if you want to bring in the waist and give yourself a bit of shape. You can also put an inseam pocket there, but you know what I feel about inseam pockets. I usually don't do those, but they are there. And then for the skirt, you can go from 1 tier, 2 tiers, or 3 tiers. You can print these tiers out according to the size that you choose, or there's also a chart in the instructions where you can actually just cut them straight onto fabric, which I really appreciate because it's just easier for me to just cut directly onto fabric if I know what measurements to cut them out. So you can mix and match tiers that are shorter and longer. Depending on where you place them on the dress, they'll be either on the top or the bottom. So there's a lot to play with for you to customize and get the perfect length for you. I've got a little chart diagram here so you can see all the options, where you can have a really short top, which is just the bodice and a short tee. Then you can have a long top, which is the bodice and a long tee. Then you have the mini dresses, which are really mini. They hit the thigh, and you can add 2 short tees, or a long mini dress, which is a long tee and a short tee. That's the one I've done. And then the knee length is 2 long tees, and then you go to the midi, and then you see in the picture how you can go adding on these tees. The first tee has a width that is larger than the waist, of course, because it's gathered into the waist, and then the second tee is wider than the first tee because it's gathered onto that, and so on and so forth. So it can be quite fabric hungry if you decide to do the full maxi, because the last tee is really wide. But I've just stayed with the short skirts because that's what I like. Because the Meet You dress is a brand new pattern, it is 15% off until Monday noon Melbourne time. So that in the US is sort of Sunday night sort of thing. So there's still a few days for you to be able to get it for a bit less. There are also a group of patterns that go with this style that are also 15% off. One of them is the palazzo pants. I've already made a video on it, so that one is also discounted. My affiliate link is down below if you'd like to use it, if you want to get this pattern for yourself. Using my link doesn't cost you any extra. You pay the same amount, it's just that a small amount comes back as commission for me, and I really appreciate if you do use it, because that is one of the ways I make an income doing what I do here on YouTube. This is not for knit fabric, so you definitely want woven fabrics. That is how this pattern has been drafted. This pattern has been drafted for woven fabrics, so don't use knit fabrics for this one. There are similar styles at Pattern Emporium that have this look that are made for knit fabric. So if you like the look but you prefer the knits, I would suggest you look at those other patterns. I've got a little chart so you can see the ones that are going to give you a more flowy look, which is what I always want, and others that are going to be a little bit more structured, you know, like your linen, lightweight cottons, cotton voile, cotton gauze, maybe some shirting, chambray, that type of thing. The gathers are just going to be a little bit more voluminous. But then if you go with the rayon blends, I love my rayon linen blends, crepe, you know, you're going to have a really flowy style that can actually take in the volume of the gathers while staying close to the body and not standing away from the body like the more structured fabrics do. I had a really hard time choosing my fabrics because I collect a lot of woven fabrics. I love them. So I settled on a rayon linen blend. It's a light to medium weight fabric. I've used it a lot before. Black with a print, love it. Initially I was only planning to do one, just a dress, but when I was finishing the dress I just started rummaging around to see what I can find so I can make a sleeveless top as well. And I found the most strange fabric from my stash back from Bolivia market days. You know, I don't know where it came from. Probably cost 50 cents, but it is a velvet that looks like a knit, like a crushed velvet, but is totally woven. There's no stretch anywhere, and you'll see it up closer later. It's really beautiful. It's black, and I've made a top. The sizes available are in Australian sizing from sizes 4 to 30. That in US sizing is equivalent to a 0 to 26 US, and it'll go up to around the 54-inch bust and the 58.5-inch hip. It is a nice roomy design. According to my body measurements, I should have made a size 18, but then doing some flat pattern measurements, I actually printed out both sizes so I could measure the pattern pieces. I settled on making the size 16, and I thought I was going to be okay with that. It just depends on how you prefer your clothing. I do prefer a little closer to the body, and I thought I was still going to have enough ease at the waist and hips to be comfortable. For the bodice, you have a regular bodice and one that's longer, about 2 inches longer. I chose to do that one because I'm just taller. In general, it is a really easy fit style. There is no full bust option there. You just have to see and make a muslin if you have a larger cup size. In my case, with my C cup, I did not need to do any full bust adjustment. It's raining really hard right now. About the sewing, it is a pretty easy dress or top to sew. There is a yoke. It's only in a single layer, so you don't have to do a burrito or anything. You finish the neckline with binding, and in the instructions you see a lot of gathering using clear elastic. I wish I had that type of elastic. My clear elastic is the type that is really stiff and doesn't stretch at all. It stretches very minimally. It's the type I use to stabilize shoulder seams and things. So I don't have the appropriate notion, so I just did my gathering traditionally. I have filmed a lot of the sewing for you. Basically my process, the way I sew things, it might not be in the same order as the instructions or in the same way, but the end result is pretty much the same. So I like sharing my unique way of sewing with you. As I was cutting out, I figured out I had enough to cut 2 yokes, which meant I was able to do a really cool technique to enclose the neckline at the back and the back seam, and then I only needed to bind the front neckline. So really cool. You see a lot of that. Some gathering, some sleeves. Here I have the pieces for the upper part of the dress. This is the front bodice. It's cut on the fold. The back bodice also cut on the fold, and the little yoke on the top. I do have enough fabric to cut a second yoke. The pattern only has 1 layer, but just because I have a little piece left over, I might as well just cut a second layer and do some enclosed seams there. Now, because I'm going to cut a second layer of the yoke, I'm going to be able to enclose this seam, the back seam and the back neckline. The only piece I'm going to be using binding with is in this front neckline here. Really fun technique. I've got it in my head. I know how to do it. And basically the shoulder seams are going to be enclosed, including that binding there in between these shoulder seams of the yoke. So I'll just go ahead and cut my second yoke piece, and I'll just show you quickly how to do that as an option, just if you want to do a few extra steps. Otherwise, sewing just the single layer of the yoke is super easy, and then you just bind your neckline. I'm doing the short sleeve version. Underneath this bodice, I'll have 2 tiers. I'm making a dress that's going to hit above my knee. The first tier is a little longer than the second, and those are just rectangles. My dress is going to be above the knee, and I have my 2 tiers here. This is called a long tier just because this length is longer than this one, so that one will go attached to the bodice, and this second T is wider because this one is going to be gathered onto that one. So there are 3 T's that you can put on your dress to make it whatever length you want. If you wanted a long top, you could just add that T to your bodice and you're done. If you wanted a shorter top, you can add the shorter T, but that width right there onto the bodice. And you can mix and match to get a whole bunch of lengths and styles. What I've done though to this long T and this short T is add an inch to both of them so that it reaches my knee, or else it would be way too short for me. If you want to make a dress that's a really mini dress, you can make the first T short and the second T short while keeping these widths. And it's all given in the pattern. I didn't actually print the pattern pieces, I just measured my rectangles directly on fabric, and I thought that was way faster. I'm just stay stitching the front neckline. I'm doing it in 2 goes from the shoulder seams up to the center. So I flip my fabric in order to do that, and I've done it with a seam allowance that's smaller than 1/4 inch. I calculated how much binding I needed. It's a really small piece just to do this front neckline, so I have it here. It's cut on the bias, and I use this bias tape maker that has an 18 on the back. When you do that, you get 2 folds, but I like my binding narrower finished, so I trim away that first fold. Now the edge that's raw, that's what I'm going to put against the neckline here, right sides together, pin it along and sew it at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here I'm sewing the binding onto the front neckline only. I'm using 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'll do what I do with every neckline and every binding on a curved area. I'll snip, I'll flip it to the inside, and I'll understitch all the way along the neckline to keep this binding inside and not be seen. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip this binding towards the inside of the garment. I like hand basting that, of course, so it's neat and it doesn't move anywhere. And then I top stitch it down. Then my front binding is done. Look how pretty. I always love this result. I love seeing this inside. It's just so neat. And that's how it looks like on this side. So it was just the front that has been bound. We'll put this aside. So I have my 2 yoke pieces here, and the way that this is going to be sewn is a little different to what you've seen before, and that's because I want to have a clean back seam as well here on the neckline. So I've just put them right sides together, and I'm going to sew them together with 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to do the same thing I do for necklines. Snip into the curves, flip it, understitch. It's just a little bit different. Once the neckline is done there, then we can sew on the back piece to one of these yokes. I'm using 1/4 inch seam allowance on this back neckline because it's the same amount that I use on the front when I sewed on the binding. So everything's going to match up, the shoulder seams are going to match up. So I'm just going to snip into the curve here, like any neckline. I'm going to open this up. Any of these can be on the inside at this stage, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to understitch the seam allowance to this side. This is the one that's going to be inside, but I'm not going to understitch from the very edge. I'm going to start about 5/8 of an inch from the edge, because if you do it from the very edge, it'll get in the way later. Here I'm also going to stop before reaching the edge. Okay, so these yokes are looking pretty strange. They've been united at the neckline, but we still have these long ends raw. So choose the one that wasn't understitched. Here you can see the understitching. So not this yoke, the one that's clean. So when this is finished, the one that's understitched is going to be inside. So you want the layer of the yoke that's going to be on the outside on your hand, so you don't get confused. I'm just going to put a pin through there. So I know this is my yoke, and so I'm going to place that yoke there, get my back piece and put it right sides together here. So I'm sewing my back piece to the yoke that's going to be visible. Okay, I've started sewing the main yoke, the one that's going to be on the outside, with the back piece right sides together, and I'm using a longer stitch length and sewing smaller than the 3/8 seam allowance. This is just a basting stitch for now. Okay, so here we have a yoke that hasn't been sewn onto anything. We have a raw edge. Here we have the main yoke. That's the one that you're going to see on the outside, sewn to the back. And now what we need to do is a burrito roll. So we're just going to wrap this all up so it doesn't create space, like this. And this is going to come around and meet this seam right there. And now this is going to be the definite stitch, and we are going to align this. Okay, so now I'm sewing the definite stitch here at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with a regular stitch length. Okay, this was a really different burrito because we're enclosing the neckline and the back seam, but we have free shoulder seams and it's different. Let's just pull everything out through one of the sides here and it's always magical. Okay, so this is the inside. This is where we have the understitching. So this yoke piece is going to be inside. That seam is enclosed. Now when you flip this to the right side of the garment, everything's neat and closed and the neckline is super clean like that. What we need to do now is enclose the front shoulder seams in between these. It gets a little fiddly because there's not a lot of space to work with here. But on this main yoke, right here, the right side of the garment, get our front shoulders, match them to the main yoke, right sides together, right in there. So let's just put a pin there for now, right at that seam. And now we bring this forward and wrap around. So we are wrapping the back shoulder seams from the two yoke pieces around the single front shoulder seam. So it's a little fiddly, but totally doable. I'll just go ahead and pin this. This is why you needed this edge to be clean and not have understitching there, because that can definitely get in the way. Okay, for some reason I found that putting the pins in this way was easier than putting them like that. So that's one done. Here's the other one. Remember, this is the right side of the garment, the back. You have the yoke that's going to be visible. That's the one that you align with your front right here. Right sides together. Meet this edge of the neckline that's already bound right here where these seams join. Right there. And then bring this yoke, the one that's going to be on the inside, over like this, wrapping it around. And then you have to fiddle and align this again. Look, this might seem a little fiddly, but it's going to look so nice on the inside. It's always so worth it. And all you need to do is have two yokes to make this possible. Okay, here we have two little shoulder seams. So we sew these with 3/8 seam allowance. We're sewing through 3 layers, 2 yokes and the front shoulder seam. Here on this corner you can trim away some bulk, not that much but some, and this is where the magic happens. You just flip it and you can see that the front neckline is coming from within there. That's how it's going to look on the right side. So a super clean back neckline, and then the front has the binding. So pretty. I love it so much. I really love this. And so it's the same on the other side. Same thing. Sew it and flip it. Okay, flip, and it's so neat. I love it so much. At this point the neckline of my bodice is done, my yoke is done. I have open side seams. Now the way I like to do it is to sew the gathers onto the front separately and onto the back separately. I just find gathering into a smaller section easier to manage than doing it on the round. So I'm going to attach the first and second tees to the front, the first and second tees to the back, and then I'm going to sew the side seam, matching up all the tees on the sides, and then I'm going to have my closed armhole where I can set in my sleeve at the very end. I'm doing my gathers traditionally, and that's just by doing gathering stitches on the machine. That is just a long stitch length, nothing really special. Here you can see I've already done the first row about 1/4 inch from the edge, and now I'm doing the second row 5/8 from the edge. That means that when I gather, I'm going to get a really nice neat gather in between these 2 rows, and the seam allowance is smack in the middle there. It'll be really easy to gather and get a neat result. This shoulder tee is going to be on the bottom, so on the edge that I didn't do these gathering stitches, I have already serged it so that it could be easy to hem later. I'm going to put together the 2 tees of the skirt before gathering the top tee to the bodice. So I have the shoulder tee here that is larger than this one. What I do is match the centers first. You can see the blue lines there. And then the sides, I pull the strings this way towards the center and gather half. And then I gather the other half. I think it's easier to manage that way. I'm just going to take these 2 threads and start pulling and gathering until this length is gone and it matches the same one that's at the back. Here I've got my 2 pieces together, always the gathers on top so you can see what you're doing, and I'm sewing at 3/8 seam allowance. This seam is falling right in the middle of my 2 gathering stitches, and it makes it super easy and it'll give you super neat gathers. I removed the lower basting stitch. That was really easy to do, just whip it out, and now I'm just serging these edges. Okay, I've got 2 here, one for the front, one for the back. The shoulder tee is already gathered on. I've pressed the seam allowance up. I've also pressed the hem allowance without sewing it first. This fabric is super easy to press, so it will just make sewing it later super easy. So what I'm gonna do now is gather this top part onto the bodice, and then I'll have a separate front, a separate back, and then I can sew the side seams of the dress, including these seams, all in one go. I have both my sleeves here. I've sewn the seam there, and I've folded up the hem allowance. Hem allowance for any length of the sleeve of it is 3/4 of an inch. I've just folded that up. I went measuring along with this so it was nice and even. And this hem will also be the casing for an elastic. You need 3/8 of an inch wide elastic. And in the instructions, you'll find a chart that suggests an amount that you have for your arm, but I'm actually going to do that on my body. The elastic bit will be the very last thing I do. Here in the sleeves, I'm going to leave a little opening and thread my elastic at the very end to make sure that I'm comfortable and that it's not actually like pressing against my skin, that it's a little bit loose like that. Just personal preference so that I'm more comfortable. But it's so easy. Just hem it, leave a little opening for the elastic, and that's done. There's nothing complex about these sleeves. So that's sewn, and here is a little opening for the elastic, and I'll put that in at the end and close it up. This is the sleeve sewn in. There are the 2 double notches that match the sleeve and the single notch. This is the back, this is the front. Here in the center area of the sleeve cap, you match it to a notch you find on the yoke. So it doesn't match any of these yoke seams. You need to mark that. I had marked that on the wrong side of my fabric, so I had to mark it again on the right side, so that was it. So I did that gathering stitch there, but I had to pull the strings only very slightly. So you can see it's really easy to set in. There's no special gathers there or anything really difficult to do. I'll show you my dress first. The print is just so nice, and look at the wrong side of the fabric. You can see how the texture is. It's so drapey. It's a heavier fabric. It's not as light as 100% rayon. This is a rayon linen blend, so there is about 22% linen in here and the rest is rayon. So mainly rayon, so that's what gives you the drape. And you can see the yoke there is small and my seam is enclosed like that. You saw how that was done. I really enjoyed doing that. The sleeve, super easy to set in, as you saw. There's not a lot of easing to do on this area, very minimal, so it's pretty much a stress-free sleeve insertion. If sleeves are not like the thing that you look mostly forward to in sewing, don't worry about this one. And the casing was the last thing I did. The pattern suggested an amount for my size. I cut mine 3/4 of an inch wider just in case, and I was right on because that's how I wanted it. If I'd cut it what it said there, I think it would have been a little bit snug. It's just personal preference. I don't want the elastic to touch my skin, like to actually be tight there. I want it to just be loose, so mine is a little looser. It's really clean here on the front. I was really worried to not get a cluster of flowers right on my apex, so this ended up being in the middle and my bust is on the black area. So I had to think about that before cutting. The gathers there, you can see, are not much. It's very slight right there, front and the back. I have ties coming out of the side seam. They are optional, but I decided to put them on the dress. I have the long tee first. I added an inch to my long tee, and then my short tee also has 1 inch extra so that the dress hits me right above the knee. That's the length I wanted. I didn't want it under the knee or way above the knee, so I just had to customize like that. Okay, that's the back. The yoke is very little, it's enclosed. This neckline is enclosed, I don't have binding there. And you can see that the seam of the yoke comes forward a little bit, and then I have the binding on the front neckline only, and that comes from within the 2 layers of the back yoke. I adore this technique. I absolutely love it. I think it's so clean and so neat. And I remembered it while I was cutting out and thinking, yeah, I can do that. So it wasn't that I planned to do this, it just happened. I'm glad it did. I always find it much easier to sew the side seam in one go instead of sewing the whole gathers on the round. I find gathers easier to manage that way, and everything matches really neatly in there. Let's see this one on. I was just right there getting wet to film for you. That's why my hair's been growing, you know, as we speak. This is a faraway look at my Meet You There dress. It's raining right now. I am actually standing in the rain. It's so nice. I made my dress with a rayon linen blend. I love the flowery print and I'm always a fan of black background. I have the bodice for the toe option. It's just a longer bodice and it fits me perfectly just because I'm a little bit taller. I have the half length bishop sleeves here with an elastic casing, super comfortable. And I chose to make the long mini dress. It's not really a mini dress, it's just right above the knee, and that has use a long tee and a shorter tee. I made a size 16 Australian for mine. I have untied these are optional, so you can see the waist has quite a lot of space in there, and you can make your dress and your top without the ties, but I do like having the waist definition there. I think it just suits me better and I feel way more comfortable with the ties there. These gathers are not excessive, they just drape right over your tummy. I think it's super nice, very comfy. I don't feel constricted, it's just really nice. There are 3 neckline depths, a higher one, this is the medium one, and there's a lower one. I think the lower one would be too low for what I like. I think this is perfectly fine like that. My sleeves, very comfortable. I have the half length bishop sleeve with the elastic there. I left my elastic relatively loose because I just find it more comfortable like that if it's not actually tight there on my arm, so very happy with that. Great shoulder fit. I'm really happy with everything up here. The seam of the yoke comes slightly forward, so it's not right on the shoulder. With the print you won't be able to see, but there is a yoke back there. Here's a closer look at the neckline. I have some binding inside, it's super neat. On the outside you can just see 1 row of top stitching. I have an extra layer of the yoke to enclose some seams is there as an optional technique. Closer look at the casing, it's just a hem with an elastic inside. It's very easy to do. So happy with my dress and my choices, the length, the fabric, the look, everything. It's just really comfortable and I find it really pretty. It'll be a joy to wear for sure.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been raining down like hail. I'm weak. I have tried to give you my soul, but you can't love something you own. It's too late to repair what we made. What can I do?
The second one was made with a really small piece of fabric. I tried my best to place sleeves on there, they just were not gonna fit. So I just settled on a sleeveless version, which is also an official version. The difference here is that I used store-bought bias tape. I didn't make my own bias tape for this one, so you can see that in there. It worked perfectly well. This is not a fabric I would have wanted to make binding with. It's just fluff everywhere and it's just not right. So I'm glad I had tons of that other bias tape. It saved a lot of the time also. So that's really neat in there, really enjoy that. It is a strange fabric, you know, it looks like it's a knit, but it's really not, and it's a little bit sheer if you can tell. There is my back yoke piece there and it's been top stitched right there, you can see it. And otherwise it's just a short top. It has a short tee that's being gathered in there. It's so nice. There's a nap, so I cut everything in the same direction. And it's such a basic, simple top, but it fits so nicely. I had actually made ties and sewed them on, and when I tried it on I felt nope, the ties are not right for this type of fabric, because although it is a light fabric, it is sort of fluffy and it just didn't look right. So I just removed the ties and this top is just a little more relaxed fitting without the ties. So that's how it looks inside. The binding, the yoke seam, front, back, super simple. And then just one little tee to make a short top. I'll probably pair this with fitted things down below, fitted pants or a fitted pencil skirt. Very happy with this make. Let's see it on. This is my Meet You There top in a really nice fabric. I'll just step into the rain for a tad. It's so nice and fresh, so nice on the skin. So I'm actually modeling in the rain for you. It's a woven velvet, super lightweight. I've made the short top. It's got a short tee attached to the bodice, the same fit as the other one I made. And this one is sleeveless. This one doesn't have ties. It's a nice and relaxed fit and I really like how it turned out. Also a size 16. Here's my top up closer. The bodice hits my waist, so I'm very happy about that. I have the tall length bodice, so it's right at my waist, and the same at the back. I have the gathers there. They're not excessive, I think they're just right, and I thought the ties were a little bit bulky with this fabric, so I just left them out completely. And I'm really happy I have a top like that to wear with fitted jeans or fitted pencil skirt. Love it. I think the lighting's a little bit better here, so you can see the texture, the look. There is a nap. So precious. I love this fabric. Medium right, I have the same depth of neckline. The medium one, there is a higher one and a lower one. Sleeveless armhole with no modifications. I think it fits really well. I don't have gaping and I have enough cover there to be happy. Really like it. It's just a really weird fabric that makes this simple style, so special. I have binding inside, and I actually use satin bias tape that you buy in the shops to finish this because this fabric wasn't appropriate to make binding. I have the same here on the armholes. I did top stitch the yoke, I hope you can see that, and same as these front seams there, just more details. I'm really happy I took the plunger, made a top, because I was doubting myself. I always just wanted to make a dress, but I thought, hey, let's give it a go. This fabric makes it really special. I just absolutely love it. It's so unique. It's not neat, but it looks like one, so I love that. And yeah, flowy, black, it'll go with everything. Really enjoyed this make.
It's a shame to watch us fade away, but all the beautiful things we made are great. I have tried to give you my life, but you can't see in the dead of the night. I'm alone, I'm scared, where'd you go? What can I do?
I wish I'd had more time to make more. I would have loved to make another dress, a sleeveless one, because I just wear those a lot. And you know, if you make a sleeveless one in a heavier, like rayon twill for example, you can make it sleeveless with a lower neckline and wear a layer underneath if that's something that you do in winter, like a fitted turtleneck with tights and boots. You know, this dress could be for winter also. I'm just saying, you know, this could be really versatile. It just depends on the fabric that you use and the styling. I remember when I had real winter, I did used to layer and wear the tights and the boots look, and I was still warm in the winter wearing all my dresses. I really hope you enjoyed the technique I've shown you for enclosing the yoke, doing a different type of burrito. You know, you can roll things up in different ways, shapes and forms for different projects, and it's always really nice to figure those out. I have the best fun figuring out stuff like that while I sew, and I love sharing that with you. It's not something you'll see in pattern instructions typically. Give that a go if you want to try something new that's going to look super pretty inside. I am just really happy to look at techniques like that when I get dressed and I see the sewing inside. It's just so pretty. Don't forget, there's a few days left to see this pattern on the site and get it for a little bit less if you like it. Don't forget to use my link if you want to get your pattern. That is one way that you can support my work. I will see you again next week. I'll be busy for the next 3 or 4 days with a pretty big project I'm doing for Patreon. I do this every end of the month. You know, there's a poll and I put up some options, and I'm going to be sewing a woven blouse with a really nice collar detail. Really unique techniques there, and I'm really excited to get going. So I'll see you again next week. Bye. Happy sewing.